For most of our history, humans have been hunter-gatherers. We travel in search of food, living off the land, and never staying in one place for too long. But eventually, some humans settled down, tamed animals, and grew their own food. And today, well, we're all farmers, or at least we've come from farming societies. So how did this happen? How do we go from hunters to farmers? After comparing these two species, they found that 9 of the 23 genes were missing in humans. For example, researchers from Stanford and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign are analyzing the genomes of modern humans who live in agricultural societies and comparing them to those of humans who still live a nomadic life. They hope to find the genes that are related to our ability to domesticate plants and animals. And they're already making discoveries. In 2021, this team reported that they de-identified 6 regions of the genome that contained genetic markers associated with a nomadic lifestyle and 11 regions associated with farming. The authors cite evidence that early farming communities ate more plants than meat and bought or traded for meat from neighboring groups who had flocks of their own. But not everyone is convinced that the dual lifestyle theory is true. Some researchers pointed out that the sample size of Neolithic skeletons is just too small to draw conclusions about how the entire population lived. Others worry that archaeologists may be misinterpreting the physical remains. Ultimately, there isn't enough evidence to support any of these theories. We may never know exactly what the transition from hunter-gatherer to farmer was like, but one thing is clear: it was a big deal for humans. Farming allowed us to settle down, build permanent homes, and develop cities. It gave us the time and resources to invent new technologies, write stories, and even plan for the future. In other words, farming is what sparked the beginning of civilization. And honestly, none of that would have been possible if humans didn't start changing, not just physically, but culturally and behaviorally as well. They also point to evidence that people who lived during the Neolithic Revolution, the period of time when agriculture began, experienced an increase in body size and a decrease in stress. This could have happened because they had a reliable source of nutrition and didn't have to travel as far to find it. Some of these genetic markers were also associated with lactose tolerance, the ability to digest milk sugar. And they weren't just found in people from the Fertile Crescent, the region in the Middle East often referred to as the birthplace of agriculture. They were found in humans from all over the world. The researchers say that this suggests that the ability to digest milk came along with the development of pastoralism, the practice of herding animals. According to lead author Dr. Peter Sudment, an evolutionary biologist at the University of California, San Diego, some of these genes have to do with digestion, like lactase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down lactose. In the 2000s, archaeologists uncovered a settlement in Israel that was home to a group of hunter-gatherers who also kept goats. At the site, they found goat bones, including those of a few goats that had been kept as pets and had never been hunted. The researchers also found flint tools, but no evidence of farming. This led some experts to call these people the first transhuman herders. That means they would take their goats with them as they traveled. The goats would have provided them with milk and meat, but they would also have eaten plants growing in the wild. And that pattern of raising animals and eating plants continues today. Other genes have to do with circadian rhythms, meaning they regulate our sleep-wake cycles. And others seem to be involved in things like fertility. And as the researchers continue to analyze the genomes, they hope to learn how these genes work and what role they played in the rise of agriculture. These findings suggest that humans have experienced multiple independent events where genes important for olfaction have either stopped working or changed in some way. It looks like our sense of smell has been deteriorating for quite a while. But there was one gene in particular that smelled pretty important, literally. The researchers discovered a gene called OR7D4 was missing from every single human genome that they tested. Every single one of us has a broken sense receptor for detecting sulfur compounds. And these compounds aren't exactly pleasant. They make up the smell of rotten eggs and volcanic vents and even stinky cheese. But these smells may have once been important to our primate ancestors. The researchers hypothesized that the ability to detect sulfur was especially useful to early primates who ate lots of fruit. See, sulfur compounds are also found in plants that produce toxic fruits. So having a good nose for sulfur would have helped avoid eating poisonous food. But then again, maybe not. There is some evidence that the OR7D4 gene may have actually evolved to help us tolerate sulfur and stinky foods, because the gene seems to have stopped working after humans split from other primates, but before we started farming. Dr. Sudman says that his team would like to test this hypothesis by recreating the functional version of the gene in a lab and then exposing human cells with and without the gene to various chemicals. If they find that cells with the working gene are able to detect sulfur compounds, they'll know that their hypothesis is correct. But if not, they'll have to continue investigating. Well, it turns out that there are some really interesting clues in our DNA. Hi, it's me, and this is my channel. When people first started farming about 12,000 years ago, they didn't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I think I'll grow wheat today." They also kill other animals for food. In fact, when one group of chimps was observed over the course of a year, they were found to have caught 38 bush babies and 63 tree kangaroos, which means chimps have to be constantly on the move to find both plants and prey. And researchers have estimated that a chimp needs to spend about 40 hours a week looking for food. Not only does this mean that chimps need large territories to roam, but they also need to be very strong and agile because they have to climb into trees to get their favorite foods. These adaptations are all helpful for survival, but they don't lend themselves well to domestication. Chimps simply can't be kept in small spaces, and they certainly can't be relied upon to do human tasks. It was a gradual process that took thousands of years. And to understand what those changes were like, we can look to our closest living relatives who still hunt and gather today. Our closest living relatives, the chimpanzee, because while we don't share a lot of genetic material with them, about 98% of our DNA is shared with chimps, bonobos, and other great apes. And they can teach us a lot about our past. See, chimps live on a diet mostly of fruit, but they will eat leaves, bark, vines, piths, buds and flowers, and even insects if necessary. But as humans began to change, we started becoming less like chimps and more like us. And we can see these changes in our genes, specifically in genes related to our sense of smell. You might not know this, but dogs have more than twice as many olfactory receptors as humans do, which makes our sense of smell much weaker. This means that they can pick up on scents we miss completely and use them for hunting and tracking. But that doesn't seem to matter so much anymore. As humans began to farm and store their own food, they wouldn't have needed to sniff out wild game anymore. And that could be why humans evolved to lose their sense of smell. One study looked at the genomes of dogs and humans to find 23 genes involved in the sense of smell that had mutated since we last shared a common ancestor around 15 million years ago. But while this research is being conducted, other scientists are taking a broader approach to understanding the shift from hunter-gatherer to farmer. So far, the team has identified 180 genes that appear to have been affected by the shift from hunter-gatherer to farmer. But not everyone agrees that we went from hunter-gatherer to farmer because, well, some scientists believe that humans did both things at the same time. In fact, in 2021, a new paper proposed that this dual lifestyle of animal domestication and plant cultivation is the norm rather than the exception among human populations that adopted agriculture. And according to the dual lifestyle theory, this mixed diet and healthier lifestyle could have contributed to the shift from hunter-gatherer to farmer. Farming was a huge change for humans, but there are other changes that might be coming next. Kindly share, like, and subscribe to this channel for more.